Hey folks, Technivorous here. Welcome to the first ever episode of our new series, 3D Thursday. Today's episode we're going to be going over the ld-002r resin printer from Creality and discussing some of the pros and cons, as well as whether or not now is the right time to switch from FDM printing over to resin. So stay tuned for all of that and more today on 3D Thursday. This is the Creality ld-002r. Now this is a second iteration of Creality's first resin printer, and it is just under $300. I'll have links for it down below. Definitely worth checking out if you're thinking about trying out a resin printer. Now I'm going to show you some of the models I got off this bad boy here in a minute. You can see there is still a model hanging from the inside there. As with most resin printers, it does print in reverse, so it will lift the build plate instead of dropping the build plate or lifting the head like you see on a normal FDM machine. Now this machine was super duper easy to set up. It comes with a USB connection, so no more fiddling around with micro SD cards. It does use Chidubox as a slicer, which is a first for me. I've yet to use it, and I've started using it since I've gotten this machine, and I do have some likes and dislikes with the slicer software. I wish that Kira could do this, probably only because that's what I'm really used to. But in the end, you do get what you get, so I'm sure I'll get used to it eventually. I didn't really like Kira when I started out with it either. So let's take a look at some of these models, and then I'll explain why some of them look different than some of the others. So I have two different resins that I've tried. One is from Elegoo and one is from ShineSing. This is the ShineSing. It is a tough resin, and as you can see, I was able to achieve a glossy finish on this guy and a matte finish on this one. Now this one has been sanded down a little bit, but it was matte before I sanded it, and the trick there is simply how you expose it to UV light. Now this guy is nice and glossy because I placed it outside while it was still wet with the extra resin from the machine. I didn't rinse it at all, and that created this glossy kind of look. This one, however, was rinsed in IPA, and it was pretty much completely cleaned off. Still could use a little sanding and cleanup, but it left it with this nice matte finish. So on that same vein, this is one of the test models that comes with this printer. This is an amazing model. It is super intricate. It is pre-sliced and ready to go, and this is a beautiful, beautiful Eiffel Tower. Now I will say that there was, if you look in there real closely, you can see that railing going across there. There was another one of those along the outside, but during the curing process I accidentally knocked it over, and that rail had to go because it ripped off. So it did print perfectly. That was totally my fault. This model is amazing. Everybody I show this to thinks that this is made out of glass. The nice thing about these resin printers, if you're thinking about making the switch, is it saves a ton of finishing work. There's almost no layer lines, as you can see here. See if we can get it to focus. There we go. Those lines are crisp. Those points are perfect. You can see that this has a more transparent look here and is slightly opaque around the edges. That is because I did sand this and complete most of the finishing. There are a couple little flaws in there I'd still like to sand out, but the accuracy of this printer is amazing, and that is further illustrated by this little guy here. Now I know this is hard to see in a figurine because it is plastic, or it is translucent, but there we go. Let's get it to focus. The detail here is amazing, down to, if we can get it to focus again, there's a little skull right here. You can see the teeth and the eyes on that thing. It's pretty incredible. The chest, all the hardware in the chest, the wrinkles in his pants, everything on this is pretty much immaculate. So if you're doing miniatures, this is definitely something you want to look into. The other thing is actual translucence. Now, this is a part I'm working on. This is actually a clip for a mirror holder. It bolts to the wall and a mirror goes in here. And then it's got an M on it for my family crest. And there will be several of these holding a mirror up, but you can see it's slightly yellowed. Clear resins tend to do that from UV light. There are ways around it, but very different resins have varying degrees. Over here, let's see if we can turn a little bit. This is a work in progress. So what this is a sandy. So basically it's a sanding pen. You get the sandpaper, you wrap it around the tip and slide it through the nozzle here. And there are different tips for sanding different parts. And this actually works really well. One of the things I did run into as a problem for the resin printing was that if you don't get it out immediately and rinse it, if any of that starts to cure there, it's adding to the thickness of your part. So if you have anything that's threaded or anything like that, it's going to require extra sanding, and sanding those threads is a little bit tricky. So if you're doing any sort of threading or pieces that slide very, very, very tightly into each other, you're going to want to use a little bit of horizontal expansion, make them smaller. They don't really have that setting in Chidu Box, but there are ways to make the parts slightly smaller so that they fit. Or you're going to want to make sure that you get it out immediately when it's done and start the rinse process. But I do like the ability that this machine and other resin printers have to print completely translucent items. Now this item up here hasn't been exposed to any light yet, so it hasn't started to yellow at all. And you can see that it is pretty much perfectly clear. So I do need to remove this and take it off. I can show you that process right now, but before I do that, I need to get some gloves on. Alright, so I'm gloved up and ready to remove the model from the build plate. I need to get a couple other things. I like to keep a rag on hand, and then I have this handy spatula that comes with the printer here. And I'm going to use this to kind of pool some of this excess resin so that it drips off of the build plate. And just kind of reduce my footprint here, make less of a mess. It does get a little bit messy working with these machines, and if you're not careful, you can have certain disasters, and we don't want that. So before I pull this off, I want to make sure that I have a metal spatula or a putty knife, because I'm not going to want to walk around with it dripping all over the place. Basically, you loosen this screw here, and then the whole bed comes off. And here's my part. This one might just pop off. But you can see these rings around it. That is still liquid resin oozing, and if that's exposed to UV light, it will harden there. We don't necessarily want that, so pop our part off. Let's put this back for now. One of the other caveats with this machine is you're going to want to make sure that you put the lid back on too, because you don't want that resin hardening in the vat. It can happen. And here's our part. Now this is the part of the process where I will get some IPA and I will rinse it. But first I need to remove what little support has clung to the top here. So, got a pair of clippers here. I'm just going to kind of shave it carefully. This was printed with no support. Printed really well. Pretty happy with it. Gonna have to work on the orientation because I don't want this sort of marring on the actual dome. Now this is a prototype, so I'm not worried if the size of this isn't exactly accurate. I'm going to actually fill this with something and then try to seal it with more UV resin, but I wanted to see if this process would work. So I'm gonna come back to this part here in just a minute and show you it after it's a little bit more cleaned up. Well, let's go over some of the specs of this machine. Today we are taking a look at the Creality ld-002r. So, since we're talking specs, obviously everybody's going to want to know right off the bat, what is the build volume? We're looking at a solid 120 by 65 by 165 millimeters. Now, that may not seem overly large, but it is big enough for most things, and in fact, you can fit about 5 or 6 good-sized miniatures on here without any problems. More if you orient them properly. The layer height on this guy can go down as low as 20 microns. Recommended layer heights between 20 and 50 microns, which is pretty slim, guys. That leads to a super high resolution. The resolution on this guy is 2560 by 1600, and it is super duper accurate on the XY axis. So the Z axis, the positioning is pretty much spot on. It's led by a linear Z rod, and the printing speed is about 50 to 70 millimeters per height divided by hour. So there's a little formula there. But I can tell you the big advantage of printing with a machine like this is it doesn't print by connecting points. It prints by dividing a model into different two-dimensional pictures. So it's doing the whole picture with a single exposure, which can take anywhere from a couple seconds to a minute depending on what material you're using. But still, to finish a whole layer on a model in a few seconds is pretty incredible, and this leads to some pretty quick printing speeds compared to FDM printing. The bed leveling on it is manual. There are 4 bolts connected to the neck of the main positioning hanger here, and with these guys what you'll do is loosen them up, hone the thing down to the bed and get it flat, and then you'll tighten them up, and then you know that it's flat. It's a lot easier to level this machine than it is to level an FDM machine. So again, major perks with this machine. Now it is technically an MSLA or LCD machine. It does use most standard resins, and basically what the LCD means is that it's not a laser in there tracing a path, it's flashing an image. So you do use STL files with Chitubox. It just slices them in a different manner, and it'll slice them into layers like a regular slicer, but then instead of slicing a path out of that layer, it makes a 2D picture of the whole layer, and it's pretty incredible. You can actually see it on the screen, what light image it's beaming into the plate at that time, which is pretty cool as well. So it does support third-party materials, and it has a 3.5-inch touchscreen display. And we'll get to the display in just a second because I did want to touch on that. It's really beautiful, and there are a lot of good operations in there. But first, it does run on Chitubox, and when Chitubox puts out a file, it puts out a CTB file. Now, these files are a little bit longer to write than a standard STL because it's technically not binary, but it all goes right onto a USB stick, and the USB stick pops right in. So no more flopping around with micro drives or SD card adapters or anything like that. I am sure I'm not the only one with a bevy of these little guys just laying around, easy access. So as far as the size of the actual machine and its weight itself, the frame dimensions are 221 by 221 by 403. So basically the base of it would just barely fit on the build plate of an Ender 3, and the top of it would extend past it by about 170 millimeters. So a little bit slimmer and a little bit thinner than the Ender 3. So pretty compact design and pretty elegant as well. As promised, here's that prototype a little further developed. It looks like it's going to work for what I want to use it for. Leave me a comment down below if you think you know what this is going to be, and hit a thumbs up if you have no idea. And before we wrap this up, I wanted to show you guys a couple of the best prints I've gotten off of not only this machine, but any machine altogether. And that is because, like I said, the amazing ability to hide a seam with this printer, as well as the lack of finishing to remove layer lines. So let's start with Voldemort here. Now this is Voldemort's wand. Obviously too big to print in one piece on this printer. Went together really well and looks pretty seamless. I'm very proud of this piece. It's one of the nicer pieces that I've done, and even though it's super simple, it is definitely making me lean towards getting a lot more of these machines. Obviously I'm going to need some larger ones, but for the time being, this is definitely the handiest machine in my print shop. So this is the Elder Wand. Now, this one I took a little bit different route on the paint job. This was actually printed in that skin-colored tough resin from ShineSing, and it went together pretty seamlessly as well. I really like the detail on this one, as well as the way the paint job came out. So all in all, I'm very happy with the production quality of this printer. You really cannot beat it for the price, not to mention the fact that it is a Creality machine, and that says a lot in the 3D printing space. One of my first printers was a Creality machine. It was the Ender 3, and I still have it. In fact, excuse the mess, it's over there under repairs, or upgrades I should say. We're putting a second extruder on it, and I did finally receive the board for that, so you will see that in an upcoming episode of 3D Thursday. But for now, that's going to be it. I definitely recommend checking this printer out. As I said, there's a link below. They are affiliate links, but we got to do what we can to keep the channel going. If you guys enjoyed 3D Thursday, don't forget to tune in next week for another episode. I'm not sure what the topic will be, but if you follow us on Twitter or Instagram, we'll be sure to let you know a day or two ahead of time so you can decide if you want to tune in. But definitely hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. That way you get notified every time that 3D Thursday posts a new topic. So as I said, this should be a continuing series going forward, Thursdays at 10:30 a.m. Central Time. And we look forward to seeing you on the next 3D Thursday. Well, that's it, guys. That's going to wrap up this video. If you've noticed the shirt, the merch is available. Go ahead and check out the Teespring merch link down below. It won't be available on a channel store until I reach 10,000 subscribers, and so far I am just about to hit 5,000. So it'll be a little while, a couple more months before you see this on the actual channel, but they are available now. I have a couple other designs. Feel free to pop over there and check them out, and know that any purchase through the Teespring site definitely helps to promote our site here and increase the channel's ability to make videos in the future. So we appreciate all your support. Don't forget to check out the Teespring link, check out our Patreon link, leave a like on this video, and hit that subscribe button because we have a lot more coming at you in the coming days.